Hi everyone, in today's lesson we're going to talk about long division. Eventually, by the end of this lesson, we're going to be able to use long division to divide polynomials. So we'll eventually be able to divide this polynomial by this polynomial using a familiar procedure called long division. So let's take a trip down memory lane and go back to elementary school where we learned long division. So if I ask you to use long division to divide 512 by 4, what would you do? Well, we would put the 4 on the outside and the 512 on the inside. And what you would do to divide is you always start with the outside number and the first number. So you'd say, okay, how many times does 4 go into 5? You'd say 1 time. Then you'd multiply 1 times 4, and that gives you 4. You put it underneath there and you subtract. 5 minus 4 gives me 1. Then you say, okay, how many times does this outside 4 go into 1? It can't. So then I bring down the second term. Then you repeat the process. 4 goes into 11 now. Yes, it does. 2 times. 4 times 2. Now we do our multiplication of the 4 and the 2. That gives me 8. And we subtract. And we get 3. So how many times does 4 go into 3? It doesn't. So we bring down the second term of 32, and then we repeat the process. 4 goes into 32, nice and even, 8 times. So when we multiply 8 times 4, that gives us 32, and when we subtract, we get a remainder of 0. So you have learned in school that if you get a remainder of 0, then that means 128 and 4 are factors of 512, or it goes in evenly. So the way that we would write the answer is just 128, and you can go ahead and box that just like that. Now the answer to the division problem is called the quotient. The 4 is called the divisor, the thing you're dividing by, and this 512 is called the dividend. Okay, so it's important to understand the words because we're going to use those a little bit later. So this was, like I said, was an example that worked evenly. So what that means is 4 times 128, 4 times 128 multiplies to give me 512. So because of this remainder of 0, we know that 4 and 28, these guys, are both factors of 512. Okay, so these are good words that we're going to use, so I want to get comfortable working with them. All right, let's try another one. What is the quotient now when I have 513 divided by 4? So similar process. So 5 divided by 513. Oh, excuse me, not 5, 4. So 4 divided by 513. So how many times does 4 go into 5? 1 time. I multiply and subtract. 4 goes into 11, same thing, 2 times. 2 times 4 gives me 8. I subtract and I get 3. 4 goes into 33, 8 times. 8 times 4 is now 32. So now we have a remainder. So what that means is that they don't go in evenly. So 4 and 128 are not necessarily factors of 513. So how can we write our answer? We could write it as 128 remainder 1. Now, if you also remember, you don't need to write it using remainders. You can write it as a mixed number. So the answer would be 128 and 1/4. So the way that we do that is this 1 is my remainder and the 4 is my divisor. So what you'll do to get this 1/4 is you put the remainder over the divisor. And 128 and 1/4 is the same thing as saying 128 remainder 1. And this is what we're going to use for our polynomial long division. So let's look at example number 1. So question says, use long division to divide this polynomial by x minus 2. So just like we did before, the x minus 2 goes on the outside, And on the inside, we're going to put 6x to the third minus 19x squared plus 16x minus 4. So the idea is very similar. We're going to decide what or how many times the first, this x, is going to go into 6x to the third. So I like to think of it as multiplication. Basically, what do I have to multiply x by so that I get 6x to the third? Well, you should be thinking 6x squared. So we're going to put that on top here, right on top in line with the x squared. And then we're going to do multiplication. So 6x squared times x, that's going to give us 6x to the third. Then we're going to do 6x squared times negative 2, and that's going to give me negative 12x squared. And in true long division fashion, we're going to subtract. Now make sure you're putting those parentheses because we're just subtracting both parts. So 6x to the third minus 6x to the third, these cancel. And this is where you got to be really careful. You're doing negative 19 minus a negative 12. So in your calculators, you're typing in negative 19 minus a negative 12. So be very careful with that double negative. And you should be getting negative 7x squared. Now, we're always going to bring down this second term because I have two terms here. So we'll always bring down this term. So now, same concept. We're going to look at the first term again, the x, but now this time we want to see how do I get it to multiply to negative 7x squared. And you should be thinking negative 7x. So that goes up here. Then we multiply negative 7x times x. That's going to give me negative 7x squared. Then I'm going to multiply negative 7x times negative 2. That's going to give me a positive 14x. And again, we're going to subtract, but this time we're subtracting everything. So the negative 7x squared minus a negative would change it to plus, so these are going to cancel. And now we have 16 minus 14. That one's just 2x. And then we bring down my last term, which is a minus 4. And again, we're going to do the same concept. We want to see how many times does x go into 2x, or how do I multiply x to become 2x. And you want to say I'm going to multiply it by 2. So I put that 2 out there. And then I do 2 times x. That gives me 2x. Then I do 2 times negative 2. And that gives me negative 4. And we subtract. The 2x's cancel. And I believe the negative 4's will cancel as well. Negative 4 minus negative 4. Don't forget all those negatives. So negative 4 minus negative 4 is the same thing as saying negative 4 plus 4, which gives me 0. So we have a remainder of 0. So what that means is that it goes in evenly. So since it goes in evenly, that means that this times this must be factors of this polynomial in here. That means that if I were to multiply these two together, I would get that. So what is the answer though? It says use long division to divide. So remember, when we divide, the guy up here, this yellow part, is my quotient. So that is my answer. Now, we always want to make sure we write it outside of the long division and put a little box around it so the person grading it knows that that is the answer to the division problem. All right, I'd actually like you to pause the video right now and try number 2 on your own, and then hit resume when you're ready for the answer. All right, so take a look. This is what your work should look like. If you have any questions on this one, please jot them down and let us know in class tomorrow. All right, let's move on to the back. Okay, so in example number 3, I'd like to do this one with you because they're asking what is the quotient when this is divided by this. But what you should notice is that some exponent is missing in standard form. So we have x to the fourth, but we don't have an x to the third term. We have an x squared, we have an x, and we actually don't even have a constant, right? So we want to use zeros as placeholders. So you must include all exponents from highest degree to lowest degree and continue all the way down until you get to the number. So let's do that right now. So let's set this one up. So we have x minus 4, and we have 4x to the fourth, but we need a 0x to the third. We have a 4x squared. We have a 6x, but we need a 0. We need that constant. So you need to make sure you have every single exponent from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 to a number included in your division. And then it will work nicely. So let's do this together. So now how many times does x go into 4x to the fourth? So you should be telling me 4x to the third. And then we multiply. So we're going to multiply 4x to the third times x. That gives me 4x to the fourth. Then we're going to multiply 4x to the third times negative 4. That gives me negative 16x to the third. And we subtract. First ones cancel. Now we have 0 minus a negative. That's a double negative. So 0 minus a negative 16, that gives me positive 16. So we're left with 16x to the third. Then we bring down my minus 4x squared. So now same as before. How many times does x go into 16x to the third? Or in other words, what do I have to multiply x by to give me 16x to the third? So you should be saying 16x squared. And then we do our multiplication. 16x squared times x gives me 16x to the third. 16x squared times negative 4 gives me a negative 64x squared. And I subtract. These cancel, and I'm left with negative 4 minus a negative 64. So negative 4 minus negative 64. You could type that in, let the calculator do the work, or just say, okay, 64 minus 4 is 60. So we have 60x squared. We bring down the next term, which is 6x, and we repeat the process. So how many times does x go into now 60x squared? Well, we need to multiply this by 60x. So 60 times x, so 60x squared. Then we have 60 times negative 4, which is negative 240x. And we subtract. The first ones cancel. So now be careful. We have 6 minus a negative 240. So 6 minus a negative 240. Same thing as saying 6 plus 240, which is 246. So now we have 246x, and then we have to bring down that last term of plus 0. So now you want to ask yourself, how does x multiply to 246x? So we're just going to multiply this by 246, and then 246 times x is 246x, and then we type in 246 times 4. So you can go ahead and pause the video, type in 246 divided times 4, and hit resume when you're ready for the answer. All right, so you should have gotten negative 984. And then we subtract. These cancel. So we now have 0 minus a negative. So 0 minus a negative 984. The negatives cancel to a positive, so we're just left with positive 984. So this 984 is my remainder. And remember, remainders mean that it doesn't go in evenly. So the answer to the division problem is this quotient up here. And then we always have to do the remainder over the divisor. So let's write it out nice. So my answer is 4x to the third plus 16x squared plus 60x plus 246 plus my remainder, 984, over my divisor of x minus 4. So this is how we would write our answer. Now remember, this is my remainder, x minus 4 is my divisor. And we write it as that mixed number, so it's this plus this over that, which is the same thing as saying a mixed number. So that's the way that we always need to write it, with the remainder on top and the divisor on the bottom. And the quotient being that right here. So I'd like you now to try example number 4 on your own, and then hit resume when you're ready for the answer. Okay, take a look at the work. Okay, so your answer is your quotient, which is here, right? So my quotient is 2x squared plus 3x plus 4. Then the way that we write it is plus the remainder, so plus 3, over the divisor of 2x minus 3. So this is your final answer. So remember, it's quotient plus remainder over divisor. All right, that's it for tonight. If you have any questions, please jot them down and ask us in class tomorrow. Have a great night.